Today we're going to be learning Ketubot Daf Nun Tet. It's the Daf for Shabbat. Masechet Ketubot is sponsored by Erica and Rob Schwartz in honor of the 50th anniversary of Erica's parents, which is today, Shira and Steve Schachter. It is fitting that this milestone anniversary falls on the tractate of Ketubot and the discussion of the marriage contract. Their marriage, which has been filled with love, respect, and understanding, compassion, and of course lots of humor, has been a blessing to watch and learn from. May they continue to enjoy many more years of a happy and healthy married life together until 120. Mazal tov. We're going to get started right now with our daf. We'll do a little quick review. It's a bit of a long daf, but we'll do a quick review of where we started at the end of yesterday's daf. So we were talking about the motar, the extra money that the woman makes in it beyond her designated, what her expected salary is. Rabbi Meir says if the man designates this to hekdesh, he can. It becomes hekdesh. If he sanctifies it to the temple, it will be sanctified. When is this kadosh? The Gemara asks. Emat kadosh. Rav and Shmuel Damar Travayo. I'm 10 lines from the bottom of Nun Chedam Bet. Rav and Shmuel both say motar la'achar mita kadosh. Right? This will only be after she dies, in which case he will inherit it. Then it will become sanctified. Rav Ada bar Ahava amal motar mechayim kadosh. The motar is already immediately sanctified. Papa says, in which case are they arguing? If he's giving her mizonot and in place of the mizonot he gets, now this is a whole debate we're going to see, but let's assume until now we've learned she gives her salary, in place of that she gets mizonot. He can give her this also me'ah kesef, which is like a weekly stipend, a monthly stipend, extra money for extra expenses. In place of that, she gives. Why does she get that? Because she gives him the motar. So if he gave her both those things, and let's say even if we interchange and say one goes for the other goes for the other, he gave her both, so he gets both. Well, then my time on the man kadosh. Then Rav and Shmuel make no sense to say after her death only. All those objects are his right now. If he doesn't give her either of those things, well, then he doesn't have rights to any of them. And how could it possibly be that right now it's sanctified? So to which the Gemara answers, it must be that he gave her mizonot, he gave her one, he didn't give her the other. And then we're going to see the debate is which goes for which in place of what. So let's see, he gave her food, but he didn't give her the weekly extra stipend for extra items to buy, for her to buy. Like an allowance, that's the word I was looking for. He doesn't give her a weekly allowance in addition to the food. Rav Shmuel Savre tiknu mizonot tacha masei adeh. This is what we've understood until now. The mizonot come in place of her salary, u'me'ah kesef tacha motal. And that amount of money he gives her for that allowance is in place of the extra money. So since he didn't, since he didn't give her the ma'ah kesef, that extra money, motar didahavi, the extra goes to her. Rav Ada bar Ahava, and therefore, when he sanctifies it, it only sanctifies after death. Rav Ada bar Ahava saval, tiknu mizonot tachat motar u'ma'ah kesef tachat masei adeh. It's the reverse. The mizonot are in place of the extra money and that she makes beyond her salary. And the ma'at kesef, that weekly stipend he gives her, is in place of her salary. And remember, in this case, he gave her mizonot, but he didn't give her the ma'at kesef. Since he gave her mizonot, the motar didehave, the motar is his right now. And that's why it becomes sanctified immediately. B'mai pligi, what's the root of their debate? Mar savar midi d'shchiach mimidi d'shchiach. The first opinion, Rav and Shmuel hold, it's the typical, the thing that goes all the time. Every day she has salary. Everyone gets salary, or at least assuming she's working. And everyone needs mizonah. But the extra allowance, not everybody needs to get that, and not everybody makes extra money in their beyond the designated amount. So therefore, it makes sense to match those two things up. Umar Safar, midi de kitz, mimidi de kitz. The other one holds, Rav Ada bar Ahava says, no, it's anything that has a set amount. Now, Masei Adayim has a set amount that we're going to see in the Mishna Samach Daled. And it's going to be quoted in a minute. That the Mishna says if you do a particular job, you get a particular amount of money for that job. And anything beyond that particular amount of money is going to be the motar. So therefore, that's a set amount. The motar is not a set amount. It could be, you can make a lot more, you can make a little more. And the ma'a kesef, ma'a is a measurement of money. It's a particular amount of money. Whereas mizonot hasn't, right? It could be a lot, it could be a little, it depends how much you eat. Remember we saw that woman who ate so much food and the heirs were worried what's going to happen when we have to feed her, right? She eats so much. So that's an undefined amount. Okay. Now we're going to start with the question against either opinion. First question, nega Rav Ada, Ra'ava, metiv. Tiknu mizonot hacha masei adeh. It says in the Breita, we saw this Breita before, and this is what we've always seen. The mizonot are in place of her salary. So how could you possibly say it's in place of the ma'a kesef? So they say, I'm sorry, it's in place of the motar. Mistake, got confused for a second. It's in place of, right, the mizonot. She gets food. She has to give her extra money. Can't say that. It's not what it says here. Ema tachat motar ma'asei adeh. Oh, when it says ma'asei adeh, it means add the word motal before that in the Breita. It really means the extra money beyond her salary, right? Instead of saying salary, it really meant beyond her salary. You might say that's a bit of a stretch, but you're going to see that according to Rav and Shmuel, they have to read a Mishna like that because otherwise it doesn't make sense according to their opinion. Tashma, let's look at the Mishna on Daf Samach Dal and Amud. That's the Mishna where it says how much money the woman generally makes in particular jobs, and therefore, what would be what's considered the Masei Adayim. Tashma, let's learn from here. And this is support of Rav Ada and against Shmuel. And against Rav and Shmuel. If he doesn't give her the ma'a kesef, that extra weekly allowance, then the maaseh adeh go to her. She gets her salary. So what do you see here? Salary is in place of the extra money, not the mizonot. So ema motar maaseh adeh shala. You'd have to say here it means the extra. To which they say, but wait. But the next line in that Mishnah, ha'ala katane, this is what I mentioned before, mahi osalo. What does it mean, ma'aseh yadayim? Now, this is going to be a problem because we want to say that the words before meant the extra to her salary. Now they're saying, what is her salary? How do we determine what her salary is? Mishkal chamesh sla'im shti biyuda. She does the shti, right? It's part of the weaving process. So it's 5 sla'im in Judea. So how could it be? There, we're defining what the Masei Adayim are. We'll understand that all better when we get there in Samach Daled. But the main point here is we have a long daf, so I want to try to keep what's important for our purposes. The main thing is, right after it says Masei Adeh, which we want to say is the additional, it starts talking about the basic salary. What is considered a basic salary? To which we have an easy answer to this question. Hachi kama. Masei Adeh kama have dilida motar dida kama. How do you know what the additional amount is if you don't know what the basic amount is? So in order to determine the additional amount, you have to know what the basic amount is to know what's going to be considered additional. So therefore, and then it says, right, Mishkal chamesh sla'im shti b'Yehuda she'en eser sla'im b'Galil, right? And there they do a comparison of what it is in Judea in comparison to the Galil. Anyway, that's not important for our purposes. The point is, you could explain that Mishnah is when it says Masei Adeh, it really means the motar Masei Adeh. So to each opinion, Rav Ada and Rav and Shmuel, we had to take either the Breita or the Mishnah and change the words Masei Adayim to motar Masei Adeh, because those two sources don't work in together either which way. Because one says it's the me'a kesef in place of the extra money she gives, and the other says it's mizonot in place of the. They both say it's in place of the salary. The ma'a kesef is in place of the salary, or the mizonot is in place of the salary. So in one of the places, you're going to have to add the word motal. Each one does it in the place that matches his opinion. Next, Amar Shmuel. Going back to the Mishna now, we had a machloket about, until now, we've been dealing with Rabbi Meir, who says it's hektish. Now we're going to get into Rabbi Yochanan the Sandlar, who says the motar, the extra money she makes beyond her salary, is chulin. To which we see, Amar Shmuel, halachat Rabbi Yochanan the Sandlar. He holds like Rabbi Yochanan the Sandlar. And now we're going to deal with Rabbi Yochanan the Sandlar's position. Why is it chulin? The assumption is of the commentaries that Rabbi Yochanan the Sandlar is saying, "Ein adam makneh davar shelo ba la'olam." Okay, what's the issue here? The motar is not yet in existence. So now, 1 second, I just want to see something. No. Okay. Right. If you look in, I was trying to find which Rashi. Mi Amar Shmuel Hachi. If you look in the Rashi, Mi Amar Shmuel Hachi, about 10 lines from the top, go down a few lines to the middle of the Rashi. The riddle of that Rashi. Al matama de Rabbi Yochanan mishum davar shelo bala olam. Shadayin lo meta ve'en lo rishut b'motal ho'il ve'eno ma'alela me'a kesef. We're going to assume that what he's saying is the motar is not his yet. Why is it not his? Because he didn't give her me'a kesef, so the motar is not his. It'll only be his upon death. Since it's not his now, it'll only be his upon death. So basically, we can't allow him to have rights to it, to sanctify it. So it's chulin. That's what he says. So Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yochanan the Sandlar, to which the Gemara says, Umi Amar Shmuel Hachi, did Shmuel really say this? V'hatznan, konam shani oseh lepicha, eno tzarich la'afil. We're going to have a Mishna with 3 different opinions, okay? And then we're going to see Shmuel holds like one of the opinions, and that opinion is going to indicate that Shmuel thinks you can be makneh davar shelo ba'al olam. Okay, you can own something, have rights to it, sanctify it even, okay, because it's like a sanctification, which is konam. Konam is a language of a neder, where I'm forbidding a vow. I'm forbidding something. Now, either I could say I'm forbidding something of mine on you, or I'm forbidding something of yours to me. It's a personal one. As opposed to hekdesh. Hekdesh, I'm saying this is sanctified to the temple. That means nobody can benefit from it at all, only the temple. But if I say konam, it's saying you can't benefit from something of mine, or I can't benefit from something of yours. So if you say, konam shani oseh lepicha, should the husband annul the vow? Why? Because what she's basically saying is, what I make will be forbidden to you. Now the husband, right, needs to have access to anything she makes is basically his. We learned that already because he gives her mazono. And also it means anything she makes, he can't benefit. That's a little hard to live like that together. So comes the Tanakh and says, you don't need to annul that vow. The husband doesn't need to annul it. Why? Because it's an irrelevant vow. Why is it irrelevant? Because she has no rights to Masei Ada. They're his. So she can't even make a vow about them. They're not his. They're not hers to make a vow. Okay, so that's easy. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Yafeil. He should nullify the vow. Shema ta'adif alav yater min ha'oila. Because she can make more than the Masei Adayim. She can make more salary. That's what we talked about, the motal. And that doesn't necessarily go to him, right, depending on the situation. But let's just say right now, it doesn't go to him. And therefore, that she could forbid to him, and better for him to get rid of a vow like that, because we don't want to have things that are hers that he can't benefit from. It's a little hard to live like that. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Amar, and this is the important opinion for our purposes, because in a minute we're going to see that Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and Shmuel was the one who held like Rabbi Yochanan the Sandlar. He says, Yafel, not because Shema Ta'adif alav, but because Shema Yigal Shena v'Te'ah Surah Lachzor. Maybe he'll divorce her. And then what will happen? Once he divorces her, he no longer has rights to her Masei Adayim. So right now he has rights to them, but maybe at some future point, this is the key. It's Davar Shelo Ba'al Olam right now. It's gonna be something that will only happen in the future. When I get sure it'll happen in the future, he'll divorce her. The Masei Adayim will become hers. At that point, her Masei Adayim will be forbidden to him. And then what will happen? If he sanctifies them now, when she divorces him, the sanctification will happen. And then, right, it will be waiting all this time in a holding pattern. It'll take place right then. And then what will happen? Then, right, they'll be hers. She can then forbid. In other words, remember, she said, sorry, I hope I didn't confuse who and who. I feel like I said something wrong here. Let me just clarify. When she makes this vow, she has no rights to the Masei Adayim. They're her husband's. She can't say anything about the Masei Adayim. But when she gets divorced from him, they become hers. Standing now while they were married, said they'll be she said they'll be sanctified, right? My Masei Adayim will be sanctified. When she said it then, it's now going to apply at the moment of divorce. Then what will happen? Why should he nullify this vow? Because in the event that happens and they become sanctified, what will happen? She might want to, or he might want to, really him might want, either one of them might want, they're going to have to both want this, but they might want to get remarried. if they want to get remarried, at this point, all her Maaseh Yadayim are forbidden to him. He really can't marry her because it means he can't benefit from her at all. So basically, it's in your best interest, they say to the man, if she says such a statement, which might apply at some point in the future when they get divorced, if they get divorced, it will apply. All of her Maaseh Yadayim will be forbidden to him, and then he won't be able to remarry her. So therefore, you're better off nullifying this vow. Well, Amar Shmuel halachak Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Now, what do you see in Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri? She's forbidding something. This is the difference, by the way, one of the differences between the two cases. They're pretty similar, but one, he is sanctifying her motar. That was the Mishna. And here, she is forbidding him access to her Maaseh Yadayim. So it's related to Maaseh Yadayim of the woman, or the motar of the woman, but it's different people doing it. So in the Mishnah, we said the motar isn't his necessarily for him to do that. Here, it's that the Maaseh Yadayim are his, and she wants to do it, and she can't do it. But she can do it according, and it's what does Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri say? It will be applicable later. Her statement now will affect later if she gets divorced, which means she can sanctify or dedicate or forbid something that's not in existence right now, meaning not hers right now. And therefore, how could she do that? According to Shmuel, when in the Mishnah, Shmuel said, you can't do that, right? If he sanctifies her stuff, her motar, the extra, which is hers, it's useless because, right, it's chulin, nothing happens. So that's the big question. We're going to have 3 different answers, okay? So bear with me. It's a long section. Ki amar Shmuel, halachak Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri lahadafa. There were 3 opinions, but really there were 2, because the Tanakama said you should nullify. You don't need to nullify the vow. And the other 2 opinions, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, said, Yafel, you should nullify the vow. So when Shmuel said halachak Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, what he meant was nullify the vow, not because of the reason of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, but because of the reason of Rabbi Akiva, hadafa, because maybe she'll make more money, and that's already in existence now, or will be in existence soon, and therefore that's a little better, right? But lema, okay, but that is a little difficult then, for 3 reasons. Either it should have said halachak Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri lahadafa. If you want to say the issue is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that yafer, but not for the reason of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, but because of hadafa, you should have said that. Or inami and halachak Tanakama, or you just said, if you didn't want to say, you wanted to say nullify the vow, then you would say don't hold like Tanakama, who says you don't need to nullify the vow. Inami, and this would be the thing you should have said first, really, which is inami halachak Rabbi Akiva. If it's exactly what Rabbi Akiva said, then he should have said the halachas like Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva said basically, get rid of the neder, nullify it because of hadafat, because maybe she'll make more money. So it's very hard to answer that question, that answer. To which Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef now says, Konamot ka'amalta. 1 minute. You're saying konamot. Oh, and by the way, just so in case you thought about this, because I also thought about this, and Rashi addresses it. Rashi says that theoretically, if you're talking about hadafat, that's also davar shelo ba'al olam. Her extra money she's going to make is also not in existence right now. And theoretically, you could have asked the same question on Shmuel if you had given that answer and said, he holds like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, but lahadafat, maybe she'll make more money. That's also lo ba'al olam. And Rashi basically says at the end of the Rashi, he says, you could have lakshuye, sof lo ba'al olam, dahalo nasa, because she didn't work yet, but they had a different way to reject it. They could have used that as a rejection as well. So the answer wasn't even really a good answer in the first place, for many reasons. Amal Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef gives a different answer. Konamot ka'amarta? Wait. Konamot is very different from hekdesh. You want to ask a question from konam on a case of hekdesh, 2 totally different things. Why? Konam is, like I said, you're forbidding one person, or it could be many people, but some item of someone's on yourself, or some item of yourself on someone else. So Rav Yosef says, Shani konamot mitoch she'adam oser perot chavero alav. Right? I can take, okay, you would say like this, it has a greater scope, this case, because I can forbid your fruits on me. Now, I can't go into your house, and I can go into your house and say, listen, your fruits that you have in your tree, I will not benefit from them. Taking a vow. But I can't say, I'm sanctifying your fruits to the temple. I don't have the rights to do that. I can only sanctify things that belong to me. So you can't ask a question from Konamot on Hekdesh. Konamot has a much broader scope because I can forbid your stuff because I'm forbidding it on myself. So likewise, Adam Makdish Davar Shelo Ba L'Olam. So maybe you could sanctify something, or here it's not really sanctify, it's forbid something. Shelo Ba L'Olam. So again, when she says, my Masei Adayim are going to be forbidden to you, even though she doesn't have rights to them right now, since she might at some future point, she can actually make it a konam, because konam works very differently. Amar le Abaye. Abaye says, I don't know what you're talking about. Beit Shamai Adam Oser Perot Chavero Alav, Sheken Adam Oser Perot Hava Chavero. How does konam work? Yes, I could take your fruits and make them forbidden to me. I can also take my fruits and make them forbidden to you. But notice, I'm on one side of each of those scenarios. But yes, Sar Davar Shelo Ba L'Olam Chavero. But you can't go 2 steps away from me. I can't take something that's not even in existence and forbid it to somebody else. Just like I can't go take your fruits and say your fruits are forbidden to somebody else. I can't forbid someone else to eat your fruits. I can only forbid me to eat your fruits or you to eat my fruits. So taking something that's not even in existence and forbidding it to somebody else, which is what the case of the konam, Masei Adai, to her husband, definitely shouldn't be able to do. So that answer falls as well. Answer number 3. This is the one that gets the most complicated because we're going to start with all sorts of comparisons to our case. Anyway, let's start with the answer and then we'll get to all the comparisons. It's a case where she says, my hands will be sanctified to the one who created me, to God. Okay? Basically meaning, a husband, you can't have access to them. But what can't you have access to? My hands, not what my hands create, but my hands themselves. And then, my hands are in this world. So while I might be forbidding what my hands are going to cause work in the future, I'm talking about something that's in existence right now. So it's not a classic case of Davar Shelo Ba L'Olam because we're talking about my hands. So then they say, okay, well, first of all, it still shouldn't work. They're dead, right? My hands, right, while I'm married, anything my hands produce go to my husband. So I still can't sanctify it because they belong to my husband. The Amra Lechimagarsh. No, she says is, anything my hands do will be sanctified, meaning you can't use them, konam. They'll be like sanctified to God in the sense that you can't use them, she says to her husband, as soon as I get divorced. Okay? If I get divorced in the future, they'll be forbidden to you. And then there's the debate about Tanakama, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Does this work? Okay, is this valid or not? And that's where Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. In which case, it's not a davar she'eino ba l'olam, because she's basically saying my hands, which are in existence, and what they produce when I have access to them, which will be when I'm divorced, will be forbidden to you. And that's the situation. And then Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri reads like this: nullify the vow, because when she gets divorced and they'll be forbidden to you, that will mean you won't be able to remarry her. So in your best interest to basically nullify this vow. But this also is a problem because umi ikamidi, is there such a thing? Could it work this way? Di'ilu hashta lo kadish ulakame kadish. Right now where she's standing, she's married to him. She can't sanctify it. They belong to him. So how could she sanctify something now for later when at this present moment she doesn't have rights to sanctify it? So it shouldn't work. Okay. To which Amar Rabbi Eli, Ilamalo, Alamalo. Rabbi Eli says, I don't know why you think this is a problem. I'll compare it to a case. And I'll show you that you can. That you can basically sanctify something for some future point, even though you can't sanctify it now. You're going to see his comparison isn't great, and that's why the Gemara is going to say that's not a good comparison. So let's start with this comparison. If I'm about to sell you my land, and I say, this field that I'm about to sell you, when I get the money and I repurchase it back, it will be sanctified to God. So you're basically standing now. You actually own it now, but in another 5 minutes, you won't own it. And what you're saying is at some future point, right, I will. I will sanctify, when I will own it again, I will sanctify. Milo kacha, what would that not work? Of course that'll work. If that works, that's just like this. But it's really not, because our thing had time 1 and time 2. Time 1, she's married, and her masei adayim aren't hers. And at time 1, she stands and basically sanctifies something for a future time, time 2. This has 3 times. Right now, when I'm standing here, I actually own it. What I'm saying is when I sell it to you at T2, right, time slot 2, then, right, I'll repurchase it back from you at T3. At T2, I won't have access to it, but at T1 and T3, I actually do have access to it. And I'm talking at T1, and I'm talking about a future point of T3. So it's not exactly the same, which is exactly what Rabbi Yirmiyah says. Matkefla Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, midame, these things are not similar at all. Hatam biyadola kedisha. Hacha em biyadala gareshet atzma. This case, at this moment in the sale, he could, right? I'm selling it to you. I could sanctify it right now. But hacha, in the case when I'm married to you, I don't have rights to sanctify that item because I don't have rights to divorce myself right now, right? I can't be divorced right now. I'm not divorced right now, and I can't be. And I don't have the power to divorce myself either, right? That's always the problem with women, that they can't bring about their own divorce. Halo damya ella, it's more similar to a situation. Omer lechavero, sadeh zo shemacharti lecha, lechisha ekachenu mimcha tikdash. It's more like someone who says to their friend, this field that I sold to you, that's at T1, it's already sold, right? They're minus T1, it was mine, but it's not mine now. At this moment, I say to you, this field I sold to you a while back, which is not in my possession now, when I buy it back from you, it will be sanctified. Now that obviously doesn't work because I can't sanctify it now. So that goes back and clarifies the question, or returns us back to the question, which is, how could she possibly sanctify something when it's not in her control to sanctify it now? How could you possibly say it'll be sanctified in the future? And how could it work? So Matkefla of Papa Midam. Papa says, no, don't compare it to the field case. The field is very different. Midame, they're not similar. Hatam gufa upero biyada delokeh. When I sell you this land, you own the land itself, and you own any produce it produces. But hacha, and that's why I have zero rights to it at all. But hacha, in this case where I'm married to you, gufa biyadahu, who? My body's in my hands. And remember, my masei adayim comes from my hands. So you only have rights, you as my husband have rights to my proceeds, but you don't have rights to my body's my body, right? Not just my body, right? My physical body. We always say, no, your body's your own. But what I mean is that I have rights. You don't have all rights to me. You don't own me, right? We talk about marriage being a kinyan. Here we have proof that it's not an acquiring of her, that he owns her. He doesn't own her. He has rights to certain things of hers, her masei adayim. In place of that, by the way, he gives her food. It's not like he takes it, for himself without any return to her. And her body is hers. And that's where the masei adayim are coming from. So halo damya ella, right? Everybody rejects the previous, but brings their own comparison. It's more similar to, and this is going to still go on a little while. We're going to keep having comparisons. It's more similar to this. And then the other guy says, no, it's not really, and change it. Halo damya ella, and now we're switching to Amud Bet. Le'omer lechavero sadezo shemishkanti lecha. This field that I gave you is collateral. That's more similar. Because what's collateral? I say, you loan me money. If I don't pay back the money, take my field. Now, in the meantime, my field will be a collateral to you. Okay, what I really say, not take my field. I say, in the meantime, let's erase what I just said for a second. So in the meantime, use my field as collateral. What are you going to do? You take all the proceeds of my field. You deduct anything you've gained from my field from the amount I owe you. Either I'll at some point pay you the loan and I'll get my land back, or you'll deduct all of it until I have no loan left, right? So either which way, you're deducting what I owe you from my produce, but the land itself still belongs to me. So if I say, field that I gave you as collateral, when I redeem it from you, it will be sanctified. That would be sanctified. And that would be a good comparison to the woman. Because the woman right now, her body's hers, but the man has access to all of the proceeds, right? Everything she makes. But when she gets divorced, it'll be all hers. And she's talking about this future point of divorce. So she does have rights to her body, just like the person, the borrower, has rights to the land itself. So that should work, which would answer our question. But matkifla Rav Shisha b'rid Rav Idi midami. Now these aren't similar. Hatam biyado liftota. Hacha em biyada l'garesh atzman. This is what we said in the beginning. She can't divorce herself, whereas the borrower can pay back the money. It's in his control or her control. But this divorce thing is not in her control at all. So since she can't bring it about, it's not a good comparison. So in other words, again, the less like if you don't have control to bring it about, then you shouldn't have control to sanctify it. Halodamya Ella, it's more similar to the following case. I say, this field I gave to you as collateral for 10 years. I said in a time, which means right now and for the next 10 years, it's not in my control to buy back. When I redeem it from you, tikdash, dikadsha, this would work if I say, when I redeem it beyond the 10-year point, it will be sanctified. That's more like the Gerushin case, where now she can't have access, but at some future point, she might get divorced, she'll have it. But obviously, you might already get where Ravash is going to go with this. It's not the same thing. There, at least at the end of 10 years, the guy has the ability to bring about the right to redeem it, to buy it back, but right to pay back his loan in full. But in this case, she has no power to divorce herself. So basically, we're back to square one with the question, which is, in the case of the woman who says, when this will be sanctified in the event of divorce, since she has no control over it, and she right now can't bring about the divorce and isn't divorced and can't sanctify it, therefore, because it doesn't belong to her, Maaseh Yadayim, how could she do this? Now remember, we said that it was a case where she said, Maaseh, yikadshu yaday la'osehen. My hands will be sanctified. So we dealt a little bit with that issue, that it's her hands, except that she's not in control. She still shouldn't be able to sanctify something that she doesn't have access to right now. So Ela Amar Ravashi konamot ka'amarta shane konamot tikdushata gufninu. Wait a minute. Konamot are different. Now, different than what we said before. They're different in another way. Konamot are kdushata guf. What is kdushata guf? Let's talk about it in temple first. When you sanctify things to the temple, there's two categories. There's things that become sanctified, the body of the item, and there's things that just the value. So if I give animals to the temple, I sanctify an animal to the temple, it immediately becomes sanctified kedushat haguf. I have to bring that animal as a sacrifice. If something goes wrong with the animal, then I have to leave it to graze until it gets a blemish, and I can then, depending on the animal and what it was, but basically I'm stuck. I can't redeem that animal really. So until it gets a blemish and it's not able to go on the altar anymore. But if I sanctify my chair, then what I really mean is the value of my chair. I don't have to bring the chair itself. That's called kedushat damim. It only has sanctity in terms of its value. It's opposed to kedushat haguf, where the body of it is sanctified. Why is this relevant? We'll see in a minute. But konam, when I say my fruits are forbidden to you, or your fruits are forbidden to me, the sanctity of it, it's not exactly sanctity, but the forbiddenness of it is in the body of the item. Why is that important? And it's a little confusing because Rabbi uses the language hekdesh, and we're trying to differentiate between hekdesh and konamot, but we're differentiating between, we're basically on one side is konam and hekdesh, like animal hekdesh. Okay, let's say I designated an animal for me to pay back a loan. I said, if I don't pay back the loan, this animal will be lien to you. That's what we're going to talk about in a second. Okay, that's like the konam, which is different from the hekdesh in our Mishna, which was he sanctified her salary. That's just the value. That's not, my salary isn't even an item to be able to have kedushat haguf to it. So Rava says, hekdesh, chametz, v'shichur, mafki'im midei shiabud. We've seen this before in Yevamot, which is, there's three things that even if there was a lien on it and someone else owned it, if I had rights to it, didn't own it, but had rights to it, like I use this to pay back a loan, whether it's hekdesh, it was food, and I was supposed to give a Gentile the food. I said, take it from here if I don't pay back the loan. And then Pesach came and it turned into chametz, and I can't own things on Pesach. So that, or I had an item designated, an animal for me to pay back a loan, and then I sanctified the animal. Or shichur, I had a slave, a Canaanite slave, that was dedicated to a loan, right? I said lien, right? Take the eved if I don't pay back the loan. And then I sanctify the eved. I freed the eved. All that mafki'in midei shiabud. That removes the lien on the item. So that eved, that chametz, that food, or the hekdesh, what I sanctified, is no longer has any lien on it. That means that if this woman came and took her salary, which was dedicated to her husband, shuabad to him, lien to him, he has access to it, and she basically said it's sanctified, right? Then it removes his access to it whatsoever, which means she can sanctify it, so it works. Now the Gemara is going to ask, wait a minute though, didn't we say it's only when she says, when I divorce you, when you divorce me? So the Gemara asks, v'nikdashu mehashta, they should be sanctified immediately then, as soon as she says it, because it's mafkir midei shiabud. So now we get to this in-between thing, which is Rabbanit l'shiabudei debal ki echad delo tikdash mehashta. The rabbis came in and said, we're not going to allow this though, because then she'll remove access to him. She'll have all this power to remove access to him to all of her monetary stuff. So therefore they said, well, yes, it's true that Konam is going to remove the shibud, but only after she is no longer married to him. And then it will work. And that's why this case of Rabbi Yochanan is not davar shelo ba'al olam, and it's not that it's not hers, right? It is hers. She can actually uproot the shibud because it comes from her body. Her body's her own. She has access, right? It's her yadeha, she said, my hands, they're in this world. They are hers. And how could they be hers? Because she can uproot the shibud, but only when she gets divorced. It doesn't kick in now, and that's because the rabbis came in and strengthened his position so that she doesn't do this to all of his stuff. It was a little complicated conceptually, this whole thing, and a little bit complicated back and forth, but I hope you managed to get it. Okay, now we get to a very interesting thing, which is what work does a woman have to do as a married woman? Okay, what are her rights to her husband in the household? What are her household responsibilities? Very fascinating, right? Something, probably every couple tries to figure out, probably changes over time, who's responsible for what. In those days, the household responsibilities were really on the woman, and the husband, it was his job to really work. The women worked also. I mean, that's the whole thing about the salary, but also they did a lot of work in the house. So what does she have to do? Okay, excellent article of Shuli Mishkin on Flashback, you can find on our site, about delving more in depth into the types of things mentioned in this Mishna and categorizing them and all sorts of worthwhile read. If you're listening before Shabbat, maybe print it out before Shabbat. These are things that the woman's supposed to do for her husband. Okay, you might cringe a little bit at this, right? And remember, different times and different things, right? We don't necessarily, it's a good question. Do we hold like this the halacha? I don't know if you all are going to start weaving the thread tomorrow, spinning the thread, sorry. It's going to come up in our Mishnah. So the first category is she grinds the grains into flour, she cooks or bakes, and she does the laundry. She cooks and nurses her child, her son, which really means son or daughter. The idea here being very interesting, that she has a responsibility to her husband to basically nurse the child. She has to make the bed, which is a little different. The way we make our beds, set up the bed. It truly has a good insight. She said, matzah l'omita is more something intimate between them. And it comes up, by the way, in Nida, in terms of things they shouldn't do when she's in Nida. She shouldn't set up his bed because it's an intimate act. I don't really look at making my bed as an intimate act, but again, I think it was a little bit different than the way we view it today. And that's spinning the thread. What if she brings a shifcha with her, right? These aren't necessarily jobs the woman has to do. What if she has a maidservant? She brings him with her to the marriage. If she has one, we can take the harder labor off the list. Next category we get off. She doesn't have to cook and she doesn't have to nurse her son. Okay, 3, she doesn't have to do the bed and she doesn't have to do the threading. Okay, the spinning. Arba, now at this point we've gotten rid of everything, so it's a little bit strange why there's a 4th. Arba, if she brings 4 servants, yoshevet b'katedra. She sits right on this big chair. Very good Rashi here. Rashi is struggling with, well, There's no difference between 3 and 4. So he says, very interestingly, Katedra, lo titrach b'shvilo leilech b'shlichut lavi lo chefetz mibaya l'aliyah. If he says, go get me something upstairs, she doesn't have to go upstairs to get it, right? How many times we're in our house and someone says, oh, can you go get me this? Can you go get me that? That's like being someone's slave, okay? So then even that she doesn't have to do. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, afilu ichnisa lo mea shvachot, kofa la'asot b'tzener. She at least has to do the thread, the spinning of the thread. Shabatala mevi'i, she could bring 100 servants, doesn't matter, maidservants. Shabatala mevi'a lidei zima. If she's not busy working, it causes her to end up in relationships with other men and causes all sorts of problems. Rashba Gomer, if he takes a vow that she can't do any work, Yotzivi yitin ketubah, he has to divorce her and he's responsible. He messed up the marriage by doing that. Because it causes boredom. Okay, what's the difference between these two opinions? The Gemara is going to get to later. Okay, we'll get to that not today. But you see that there was this concern that she not busy herself with something productive. Gemara starts off with tochenet salkadatach, but she has to actually grind it herself. That's super hard work. To which they say, ela ema matchenet. The language is no. Matchenet means she causes it to be ground, meaning she puts it in the millstone. She, makes sure it's everything's set up properly. But usually it was taken by an animal around. That's how it worked, and that would grind the grains. Or else she uses a hand one. And then, in other words, meaning she uses an implement. She doesn't have to do it by hand. Our Mishnah clearly doesn't hold like Rabbi Chia, because Rabbi Chia, you're going to see, had a whole different approach to marriage and what the purpose of a wife was. Tane Rabbi Chia, ein isha ela liyofi. Okay, we don't really like that the woman should be serving the man. On the other hand, I'm not sure we like this either, which is woman's there only for her beauty. Any work that will detract from her beauty will mess up, what she's there for. She's there to be beautiful. She's also there for her children. What this means, maybe, well, if you work her too hard, maybe she won't be able to nurse her son. If you work her too hard, maybe she won't be able to bring up her children. She'll be working all the time. There's many, many ways this line can be interpreted. This is less that she shouldn't work because she won't be beautiful or because she won't have time for the children, but more like her goal, her not her goal, but women should be nicely dressed and their jewels. B'tani Rabbi Chia, another source, since it's really important to have the women be beautiful. Put on nice linen clothing. If you want her to look nice, make her elegant. If you want her to look nice and whitened, this is like a thing I guess they thought was of value. Give her little chicks to eat and give her milk as she's getting close to the age of becoming a bogeret, right? Like when she reaches maturity. Okay. A little bit of a strange thing what to do with it. Good question. I'm going to leave it aside because it's getting late. Uminika et bina. So now we have this. She's supposed to, one of her rights to her husband is to nurse the child, the son, or the child. Lema manitin diloka Beit Shamai. This sounds like it's not like Beit Shamai because the Tanya nadra shelo la'anik et bina. She took a vow not to nurse her child. Beit Shamai omrim shomet et amipi. Her neder is valid, and he says, right, she should immediately take her breast out from the child's mouth. She's done. She took a neder. She has to keep it. Beit Hillel omrim kofau minikta. He can force her. The vow is not valid because she's not allowed to do that because she can't go against what her commitment is to her husband. So the neder is not a valid neder. So, right, like it's not even her right to be able to decide she can't nurse him. So he can force her to do it. Nitgarsha, only if they're divorced, then she has no more commitments to her husband. Eino kofa, so kofe, he can't force her. But in Miami Kira, if the child only knows her and won't nurse from anybody else, so he can pay her, and then he can force her by paying her to nurse the child because it's dangerous. But what do you see here? The Beit Shamai doesn't think it's one of the rights of the woman for her husband because he says she can actually vow against it. So the witch of the Gemara says, "Afilu tema Beit Shamai," even if you say it's Beit Shamai, it could be a case where she took the vow and he basically let her vow take place. He didn't annul it. He knew about it and he didn't annul it. And this we've seen before. Kasavre Beit Shamai, hu noten etzba ben shina. He put his finger in between her teeth, like allowed her to chew his finger, right? Bite him. In other words, by him, who's really responsible? Is it she who took the vow or he who didn't annul it? Shammai says it's his fault. That's why she can keep the neder, because he basically gave up on his right. It was her fault for making the vow. Therefore, the vow is not valid. If that's the case, they should debate any case of anything. Rashi says, "Nadrami lehenot mi lo v'kiyema." And if she says you can't benefit from me, and he allowed it, normally if she takes a vow, you can't benefit from me, we blame her, and she leaves the marriage without getting her ketubah money. So they should have a machloket in that issue as well. And it didn't say that. The Tanya Beit Shamai omrim, and that's his fault or her fault. And Beit Shamai omrim, ein aminika. Sounds like she doesn't have to nurse him. And sounds like our Mishna says she has to. So it really sounds like it's against. So it really seems like our Mishna goes against Beit Shamai. And with that, we'll finish today's daf and continue this topic tomorrow. Have a great Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shavua Tov. If you're listening after Shabbat, we'll meet up on Sunday.